G'day guys, it's Jezza here from Bushbound. Welcome back. Today the Cruiser is in the shed because I'm going to be rebuilding the power steering pump. Now it sounds like it's one of those jobs that's a bit tricky and you need to know a lot about cars to do, but it's actually not as complicated as it sounds. So today I'm going to show you how to pull it out of the car, how to rebuild it and how to put it back in, and show you how it works as well. So yeah, let's get straight into it. So there's a few things that you can look for to know if your power steering pump needs replacing. The first thing is when you're turning, you'll hear a whirring sound coming from the engine bay. Now it could mean a few different things. One of the things could be you need a new power steering pump, or the other dead giveaway to know you need to replace it is if it is leaking like my one is. It's got a pretty bad leak, so it means it's definitely due to be fixed. Now this car has over 400,000 Ks on it, so yeah, it is about time to do the power steering pump. Now you can rebuild them or just straight up replace them. Replacing them is probably easier, but it is more expensive. So I'm gonna try and rebuild my one and see if that does the trick. There's a few things you can look for as you're rebuilding it to see if you can get away with it or if you actually do have to replace it. I'll show those things on the bench when we're pulling it apart. So the power steering system for every car is the same. It starts with your power steering reservoir, which is where the fluid is kept. This is low pressure, so it's not pressurized or anything. It's just sitting there. This feeds down through this hose at the back, down to your power steering pump. Mine's just down here. It is very, very dirty because it's covered in fluid because it is leaking. So it feeds down to there. This pressurizes the fluid and then sends it to the power steering box, which is over this side of the car, just down in there. That big box just there. So that uses the fluid to turn the wheels left and right as you turn the steering wheel. And then once it's used it up, it'll go back through the lines and back into the reservoir to go through the cycle again. So it sounds tricky, but it's actually not that complicated when you break it down. So to pull off this pump, it's not too hard, it's just a bit squishy by the looks of it. First thing to do is just clean up the whole area because you don't want any dirt getting anywhere it shouldn't. And then all you gotta do is pull the two fluid lines off. It will leak out some power steering fluid, but just catch it and dispose of it correctly. Once the lines are off, just cover them up so they can't get any dirt in them as well. And then there's only two bolts that hold the power steering pump into the transfer case. So you just undo those two bolts and then she should slide straight out. Very messy, but it's out. The pump is now out of the car, which is great. I've just hit it with some degreaser to make it nice and shiny. Well, kind of shiny, I guess. So this is what the pump looks like when it's out of the vehicle. It's not too complicated. It's very heavy though, which surprised me. But yeah, this gear sits inside the timing cover. So you can't see this from the outside. And that obviously is what spins the pump. Low pressure comes in the bottom, high pressure goes in the top. And yeah, as it spins, it pretty much turns the low pressure into a high pressure. And I'll show you how it does that when we go to pull it all apart. But now let's head into the process of pulling it apart and replacing all the seals in it. So the seal kits to use for these pumps, you can buy genuine ones still online. I just went to all 4x4 spares and they have these kits, which include everything you need. It's got the big O-rings, got little O-rings, got the circlip, which you'll see in a sec. It's got all the washers to use for the hose fittings that go back on the pump. I also went and bought a new shaft. These shafts can wear down, which I'll show you. And if that's worn, you need to replace it, otherwise it'll just keep leaking. So I bought one just in case it needs replacing, as well as a main bearing for the same reason. It might be fine, but just in case, while I've got it apart, I've got one here to replace it with. Pulling it apart is pretty simple. The best thing to do is just to take heaps and heaps of photos so you know how it goes back together, and then just replace your seals as you go. So the first thing to take off is this nut that holds the gear on. So this nut came off pretty easy. I had to clamp this in a vise and take it off, but that was all good. I think the next step now is to pull these 3 bolts out to pull the pump in half. Now we've got our 2 halves. I'll focus on this half first, which is just the gear and the shaft. There's also a little locator pin here, which you have just to line up the 2 halves, so know how they go back together. So I'll just keep that aside, keep it safe. So this first half, I had to end up going and getting a gear puller to get this front gear off, but that comes off nice and easily. There's also this O-ring around the front here. If I can try and get it out. This has a new one in the kit, so you can replace that one. And then next up, there is a circlip inside here. They do have new ones of these in the kit as well, which is great. So here we have the shaft now out of the housing. There is also a seal inside here. You can see inside there, that bronzy coloured thing is the seal. So I'm going to pull that out and replace it with a new one you get in your kit. And then that is the main seal done for the whole pump. So my microphone gave up on me, sorry, so I have to do a voiceover for this part. I'm just showing you how you can tell if your bearing needs to be replaced. So if you run it through your fingers like this and spin it around the shaft, it shouldn't feel like there's anything in there. It should be nice and smooth. Mine does not feel like that. It feels very gritty, like there's sand in there or something. So it's a sure sign that it definitely needs replacing. Also on the shaft, you can see these 2 grooves cut in there. That's just from the seal. A bit of dirt's got in there somehow and has worn that shaft down, which is not what you want. So this shaft also needs to be replaced. And you can see here on the brand new shaft how it is nice and shiny. There's no grooves in it. I definitely need to replace my shaft and my bearing. Now I'm just showing you a quick tip on how to remove the old bearing off the shaft using a socket. Just lightly tap it like this and it should pop off nice and easily. And as you go to put the new bearing on the new shaft, you can actually use the old bearing as a kind of spacer and knock the old bearing with the socket, which prevents you from damaging the brand new bearing. So hammer that all the way home and the bearing should seat on there nicely and feel nice and smooth. Once that's done, I'm going to put some power steering fluid on the new seal and pop that back in, as well as the new shaft and bearing, and push it all home. Rightio, now this first half is all back together. Yeah, pretty simple really when you pull it apart and break it down. I've replaced this blue seal at the front here. It is good to put a bit of power steering fluid on all these seals as you put them back in, just so when you first start the car up, they're not dry and running hot and they'll burn out straight away. So a bit of oil on there solves that. Now, that means we can bring our second half back over. Now the first half was the drive kind of section, and this half is the actual pump section. So I'll show you how this works. So these power steering pumps are called a vane pump. And what that means is it has all these tiny little vanes here, you can see. Now these are just basically rectangle bits of metal that are just loose in there, they're free. They're not held in by anything other than being wedged into place, and they can't actually fall out. So as the pump spins, this whole circle thing here spins like that. And you can see that the cavity it spins in is not actually round, it's like an oval, like oblong kind of shape. And as it spins around, the centrifugal force pushes these vanes out. So it spins around, pushes these vanes out like that. And that creates a big gap here. But as the pump continues spinning, like so, that big gap is now reduced to a small gap. So it forces all the fluid that was in the big gap into a small gap, and that makes it pressurized. And that's happening at both sides at the same time. Every single time it goes around, the fluid is put in the big gap and it is low pressure, forces it into a smaller gap, makes it high pressure. If I pull this whole thing out, there are all the vanes there, you can see. these gaps here are where the fluid comes in and goes out. So they're exactly lined up. So when it's a low pressure, it's in line with the low pressure ones. And when it's high pressure, it's in line with the high pressure ones. And so the fluid will come in through the low pressure side, feed into the back here, get stuck in this vane pump, force high pressure out the high pressure line and out the high pressure hose. And it really is as simple as that. There's not much to it really. It's quite a simple mechanical pump. So in this side, there is a seal here at the front and also a seal behind this cam ring. There is also in this side here, under this bolt, which I've already loosened, this is the control valve. So it is spring loaded, so just be careful of that. There's an O-ring in here as well to replace a spring and then a little control valve in there, which you can pull out, but it doesn't really have any replaceable parts. So I'll just leave it in there for now. I might clean it a bit, then this all goes back together, I'll replace this O-ring, and yeah, that is all it is to this side. So it's a bit simpler, which is nice and easy. Once that's done, we can pull out the cam ring, the rear housing and the spring and replace the O-ring that sits behind there before putting it all back together. So now we can just marry these two parts back together. Just make sure that locator pin is in there, make sure this O-ring is in there, and it should, hopefully, just slide straight in. Now I ended up finding that it was a bit easier to do it if I had the gear side lying face down on the bench and built the cam ring and vane pump around it before sliding the back housing on. It just made it go in a lot simpler and was easier to line everything up. Alrighty, so that is the pump all done, all back together, all nice and yeah, nice and almost brand new second hand. And then yeah, there should be 5 bolts to torque. The one that holds the gear on, the 3 that hold the 2 halves together, and one that has the control valve on it. So I'll put all those torque specs up on the screen so you know what they are. And that's just off the Toyota manual for pulling apart one of these pumps. So should be all accurate. All that's left now is to put this back in the car. This is one of those things that's either going to be really easy and go in first go, or it'll be really hard and take forever. So let's hope it's the first one. Oh, it's in. Oh, there you go. You can see the power steering pump up there, all nice and shiny, all back and tied on. With the low pressure line here hooked up, you can see it's all torqued up. The bolt to hold it onto the timing case is all back on, and from the top it's just down here below the injector pump. The high pressure side is all back on, nice and tight. The bolt just up here is back in, and yeah, she's all good to go. The last thing to do is to bleed the system and top it up with some more power steering fluid. So it's a pretty simple process. The first step is to fill your reservoir up to the bottom mark, which is the cold mark. Fill it up to that, and then we'll jack the front of the car up and then turn our steering wheel from full lock to full lock. So all the way left, then all the way right, and holding it at each end for 2 to 3 seconds just to keep it there. Lower the car down to the ground, top it back up to the cold mark, make sure it's all good. Then we'll turn the car on and then do the same thing, turn it all the way left, turn it all the way right, hold it for a few seconds at each end. Then it'll just be checking under the car for leaks, making sure there's nothing there, which there shouldn't be, hopefully. And yeah, that is all there is to it. Well, there you go, guys, that is it. That is how you refurbish your power steering pump. So thanks for watching. If you have any more questions or anything you want to know about the process, let me know. But yeah, I recommend getting the workshop repair manual because it is such a good tool to have and tells you exactly how to do what I've just done today. Anyways, thanks for sticking around and I'll catch you in the next video.